So as always, the basic stance, feet hip width apart. Remembering you can measure that, there's some variation in that, but basically feel that you've got these parallel lines going up the sides of your body nicely supported. Weight a little bit forwards. Sink your hips back just a little bit, or just allow your hips to sink back, turning gently in the middle of your body. So from the side, the basic posture, it's almost like you've just kind of rested on a fence or wall or something like that. The only difference being that if you're sitting on the wall, you'd go back like that. Whereas here, you go straight down and just allow your pelvis to tuck under a little bit. That's really quite a small movement. But it's a really important one because it helps us to maintain an upright stance without a strain. And all this combines to give us a posture which is just a little bit looser in the upper part of our body, so from hips to shoulders and so on, so we can get this little turning movement. That turning movement pulls on your shoulders. The shoulders in their turn pull on your arms. So that your arms are quite heavy. And if it helps you, on the other image, that maybe the air around you just feels a little bit thicker than normal, or the sort of like one of the most prevalent images in Tai Chi, so you're moving through water. Well-known teacher, T. Liang, Chinese American teacher, described Tai Chi once as swimming on dry land. And that idea of a resistance will have an effect on your movement and on your body. It's basically almost pretending to your body that there's more resistance around you, or perhaps maybe even making you aware of the resistance of the air around you, so that rather than just sort of a loose random movement, there's a little bit of definition starts to creep in, and that definition encourages a stronger feeling in the body and a more connected feeling in the body. And this leads us to a certain quality of movement. And it's also the thing that really starts to develop the flow of the movement. You think about the image of moving through water, most of us would quite naturally soften a little bit. You can get a sense of that just by filling up a sink with water and putting your hand in and moving your hand. A stiff hand will create more resistance, whereas in water, the joints of the hand will tend to round off a little bit. And the same will be true of hips and knees and ankles and so on. So it's quite an apt image, and it's because it really does help us to get a feel for the type of movement that we're looking for all the way through. One with a much softer feeling than we're generally accustomed to in our joints. But one where paradoxically, perhaps, without that stiffness in the joints, we start to feel a certain amount of strength building up. Initially in muscles, tendons, ligaments, but essentially we want to feel that stronger, more connected feeling in all aspects of the body, not just the muscles, but through the fascia, and also in terms of the movement itself. The actual feel of the movement is not just as though you're moving through water, but perhaps we could say that it's like you're moving like water. And so there's a real strength there as well. Now turn your hands palm out, just raise them up a little. Your arms are in front of the body, they're not pulled behind, angling out and upwards. Give you a slightly more open feeling in the chest. And then put your hands down, put your hands to shake. So we want to make use of our body's natural response to images, and as I've been saying to some people in the last week or so, also to memories. If with a bit of experience you can recall the feel of the movement, and our bodies respond to that. So we're taking a very natural connection between what we might think of as body and what we might think of as mind, and actually putting it to use, if you like to think about that. So still with that image of moving through water, imagine your feet are sort of stuck in mud, so you don't let your heels and your toes come up, and just let your weight gently roll forwards and backwards. So at a certain point, this will happen, which means that you've gone too far, or you'll go backwards. So the pivoting point of the movement is in your ankles. You have this feeling of moving through water, so there's a little bit of resistance in both directions. Arms out to your sides, and so as you go forwards, what will happen is your body finds a way to go forwards, and then your arms follow, and likewise going back. And then forward. So we use a function of intent to transmit if you like, the effect of the imagery and the ideas that we work with to our bodies. Many of the movements are very, very subtle. So rather than thinking, I need to do this and then I need to do that, sometimes it's interesting to just say, this is what I'm going to do, and to observe how your body does that. It's not the only way we do things in Tai Chi. There's a very technical side to it as well. And sometimes we might sort of veer to in one direction or another, depending on what was needed. So we have this pivoting from the ankle, and we're moving forward. We can feel our weight moving forward in our feet and our arms coming through. And then we're going to move backwards. Just a slight dropping back in the hips. If I exaggerate this, then my hips go forwards and my hips go back. But that really is quite exaggerated. I'm going to fall over if I do it. And along with that, we'll go a slight change in that orientation of the pelvis. So just as when we sunk down, there was a very gentle tucking under of the pelvis. So as we move forwards and backwards, that angle will change slightly. So these are movements, as are many movements in Tai Chi, that are kind of conscious thinking really is too crude a mechanism for developing. If I said to you, lift one arm up, you'd lift your arm up. But to say, I don't know, produce goose pimples on your hand would be a very different matter. And it's those very subtle movements that we look to build from in Tai Chi. And so it's the use of imagery, the use of ideas, the training of the mind that is really one of the key factors. So we've got three aspects to the movement. We have what we think of as mind in a very broad sense. We have obviously the kind of our body, the physical aspect of the movements. Then we have the movement itself, the flow, the energy. And between them, these three things, these three components make up the whole movement. They interact with each other. So sometimes we might want to think about the technical side of it. For instance, are you actually pivoting from your ankles here? Or are you bending your head forwards and backwards? There's quite a difference. So I can just find something to demonstrate that with. If I can find something. Oh, there we go. So if you can imagine your body with this pole in the middle. You see, if I put it by my ankle, this is what you would want the body to be doing. Not this. So that the line of your back, I wouldn't say our back is straight. I think that's unhelpful. But there's in the central position, there's an upright quality. And as I go forwards, there's still that same line along my back. I'm not trying to avoid this kind of hunching over. Now, this time as you go forwards, letting your weight, and I'll show you, but I'll exaggerate. You go forward, your weight settles behind the ball of each foot, the hips drop back, you sit back again, and then you drop down a little bit. Dropping down and bring your hands around, push up. And then as though there's a ball underneath your arms, sinking your hips, pressing the ball down. Pushing up. Expanding and contracting. The exercise is called rooting down. Rooting down being the term we use to describe this sinking down, and within the body, a feeling of your center of gravity dropping, giving you the more stable foundation, the more stable base for the movement, reducing the need for straining in the upper part of your body, simply to remain upright. It's also true that the rooting down, the root, provides the impetus for the push up. Think of being on a trampoline or a bouncy castle. You drop down on the trampoline. It's not until you drop down and you've sunk down a little bit that the trampoline will contract and push you up. And it's a very similar kind of dynamic here. So the root is both a way of reshaping our body so that we're not straining, not fighting against the pull of gravity the whole time. Imagine what it would be like to go around with a kind of, carrying a heavy box above your head or something like that. To avoid that if at all possible. At the same time, the root is also the source of the movement, the energy that's going to push you up again. Now turn your hands palm out. Yeah, you can come up on either side again, slightly in front of your body. So if you look here at this point, my little finger is more or less in line with my ear and this line across my shoulder, not that. Retaining a kind of concave feeling in the ribs and the chest. This is the wild goose. So one of the images we might use would be the one of a large bird in flight, very smooth, very graceful. If that doesn't work for you, then you might want to, for instance, just imagine that your arms feel like big feathers waving up and down, or that you're still in water and there's a little ball underneath the palm of each hand, and you're sinking down to try and press those balls down. And then as you come up, try not to let them come up too quickly. As always, it's the dropping of your hips, this is the sinking into the root and then pushing up. Note that when you drop your hips, it's not the knees bending forwards, which throws you offline. It can also potentially, in the long term, be damaging to your knees. It's my hips dropping back. I'm exaggerating now again, and then push up. So again, we want to try and keep that area around the center of the body, belly, hips, lower back, very soft so that we're not straining and reducing the potential for movement, this tilting movement in our pelvis. This time, dropping your hands down and pushing up, parting the clouds. A little bit more expansive than the previous two exercises. Feel the movement coming from the soles of your feet, pushing up through your hips, expanding in belly and chest, and then draining away from the chest and your belly through your hips, back down into your feet. One more time. And then movement, dragon plucks the stars from the sky, feeling the expansion all the way through one side of your body. At the top of the movement, just wind your arm around, so you're going to pluck an apple off the tree. Pull down. And just put your attention gently to the opposite side. Same thing, extending and contracting. When you wrap your fingers around, and I'll just keep the hand a bit lower, very gently sort of scoop around, leaving a hollow in the middle of your hand, and then pull down. Don't grip tight. But as I said, pluck an apple off a tree. Think of something softer like a peach. Peach would be more traditional in Chinese imagery anyway. And what you don't want to do is grip it hard. If you squeeze on the fruit, it will just go squishy. So you sort of wrap your hand around the fruit, you twist to break the stem, and then you pull down. It's almost as though you've placed a cage around the fruit rather than gripped it. And that leaves a nice open feeling in your wrists and your arms. You can feel the difference. If you do grip tight, it stiffens up the whole arm and the shoulder. And then changing again. Hands at your side, this time palms open, still slightly cupped in your hands, pushing up. Take time to let your hands come back to your side. Just do the first and the last of this of the set for the moment. Push out to the sides. Once again, if you look at my arms when they're extended, my little finger here, more or less in line with this line across my shoulder and my ear. And here, not even that far. Here, you can see my hands are in front of my head, not back there. As soon as I go back there, I'm tight in my shoulders. But bear in mind, it's a very common habit to lean back and just think, you know, about getting something down off a shelf. You can reach up and I find yourself almost toppling backwards. Just be aware of that. We want to keep a very long, very broad feeling in our back compared to the front of the body. And this is a good practice to really feel that, because it feels like somebody's massaging your back. First of all, lengthways and then across. And if you do get your hands in the wrong position and are pulling them back, you'll start to lose that nice feeling in your back. Now this time, as you push out, turning your hips and your waist. So your hands stay in the same position relative to your chest, but the whole of the upper body will turn. So you're turning from this central part of your body, not from your solar plexus or your shoulders. And you finish with the sideways push. So you've got 4 movements, 4 directions of movement now. First one is pressing up, facing forwards. Shoulders dropping just a little bit as your hand glides. Second and third are the sideways push with a little bit of a turn. The turn is here in the center of your body. Back. Take your time with the returning movement, don't rush it. Turn in the other direction. And back, hands turn, palm up, and then facing forwards and pushing out. And those are your 4 directions. Always remember that the 2 stages of the movement, the expansion and the contraction, should be equal in length. Again, recognize that there is a tendency to rush the returning stage. One way that you might remedy that would just be to do a little count. It doesn't matter how many you count to, so you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back. 2, 3, 4, and then sideways. 2, 3, 4, and back. 2, 3, 4. Don't worry about getting them exact and precise. It's really just to slow you down. It's very tempting with this one to focus on the expanding movement. And quite often see people when they start up doing these things, they're here, and then they're thinking, well, where do I go next? And coming around. And in fact, you just return. You come back to this central point and you push out. You come back and you extend out. Or if you prefer to think of it in more abstract terms, the Chinese terms would be yang, and then yin. And once again, we're looking for the correct balance between those two primal stages, the expansion, the contraction, however you think. One more round. Remember, weight slightly forwards, hips dropping back, soften your knees. Okay. Your hands drop again. Just feel their weight hanging from the shoulders, pinning the fingers of one hand back, letting the arms swing out over your head and down the center line of your body. So that imagine that line from the crown of your head to your nose down to your navel, touching the ground halfway between your feet. Good. Now, if it's comfortable from this position, turn a little bit down again. Now, switching sides. And if it's comfortable, add in the turn. Now, go back to the wild goose. Pushing up and down, so hips rising and falling. We're going to make a couple of changes, one of which is to turn your hands palm up as you come up, and then palm down as you go down. palm up. And down. This time, push up, and as you turn your hands palm down, as they start to descend, tilt your hips back so your arms are drawn over, and we're into the movement, rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. So the key difference here, the key element here is changing our hips and our pelvis. Up until now, as I pointed out, the pelvis has remained level. And that's how we would normally do most of the exercises, how we spend most of our lives, of course, looking for the upright position. But here, we tilt forwards and then just allow the hips to drop back down. Don't strain in your neck or your back. Pull your head up. Just let your hips and your pelvis do that for you. Just focus on the idea that there's a direct connection, a direct link between your hips and your shoulders. So it's almost like, you carry on, if I can do this, this is a bit tricky. So there, it's almost like when I do this, it's this. So if you can see the end of the pole, it's like somebody's pushed down on the end of the pole, and in doing so, it's come up. It's a simple leverage thing, really, when you think about it. Push down on one end, the other end comes up. It's quite a small lever, so it's not, but it is a lever nevertheless. So the way to come up right without straining is to focus on what's happening in the middle of the body. And likewise with this next exercise, this time leaving your hands in front of your hips, turning and pushing out and swinging out. Coming to the upright position. This is polishing the table. One more of these on each side. And let your hand rest. Shake out. We can see learning Tai Chi, a large part of it at least, is a process of unlearning. We're very much encouraged to stick our chests out, pull our shoulders back, to pull ourselves up, all of which are very damaging for the body, and all of which are really put a tremendous strain on us. In Tai Chi, our response to the pull of gravity is really much more about yielding to the pull of gravity in much the same way as you might yield to the flow of the water, not giving way to it, not just letting it pull you down, but actually lining yourself up with it. And when it comes to coming to an upright position, not doing this, not doing the straining. You can see when I strain, my back's tight, my chest is tight, but rather you feel quite lazy to begin with. It's not lazy, it's very strong posture, particularly in the legs. But sometimes the chest is described as being slightly concave rather than pushed out, and so on and so forth. And that's quite a hard thing to do. Very often when we're doing a movement like rowing a boat in the middle of the lake, this one, we get to here, and there's a very strong temptation to do this, to pull up like this, and I can feel it tight. I can feel it tighten in my back. Whereas we want to actually drop back, as though you're sitting into a chair. So it's very important to realise that we take a very different approach to basic posture, and it's a basic posture that allows us to cease straining against the pull of gravity. It creates a sense of space, and it's within that space, within the body, that we get the movement building up, the movement of the energy, the flow of the blood and oxygen, and so on and so forth. So it's the foundation for everything that we do, but it does run against our normal regular habits. Okay, so still in the parallel stance for the moment, and just transferring your weight from side to side a little bit. So again, I'm overdoing this so that you can see what's going on. I'm going a little bit too far. My hip is actually sticking out a little bit. You're only going to about 60% of the weight. The key thing is that when your weight moves across, there's this absorption of your weight in your leg. And again, that's quite difficult because quite often what we experience is the opposite. We experience a resistance to this. And then move across, say, into your left foot, so mirror my movements. You can have the foot slightly turned out. As you sink down, push the right knee forwards so that your right heel comes off the ground, and you'll go a little bit further and you turn. Put the heel down, move across, sink down and turn. So there's a bit of a push from this foot. You'll see why in a moment, why that's important. Hands in front of you. And now when you push, imagine you're playing tennis or something like that, and you're actually aiming to hit the ball. You your hand coming up, straight up and extending outwards, and turn your hand palm down, come back to the middle, swap over. Now it's your left foot pointing, pushing into the ground, your left hand coming up, and opening an extension through the left side of your body. This is called hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. If you think back to Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky, where we were alternating from side to side, extending and contracting, the feeling going up through the side of your body is the same, and the feeling going down. So the primary difference isn't in your arms. I mean, there is a change in your arms, of course. There's a shape change in your arms, but it's really your weight moving and your center turning. So another habit we develop in Tai Chi is to pay more attention to what's happening in the lower part of our body, even though the sort of dramatic bit of Tai Chi is often in our arms. We try and copy our arms, but feeling how the movement is built and developed through the whole of our body, not just one part of the body. And this again adds to the flow of the movement and gives us one of the great benefits of the movement, this sense of well-being that comes from a very holistic quality of mind, body, movement, all working as one unit rather than a much more fragmented feeling that we can sometimes have in our lives. And that encourages the flow of energy. And it also means that our arms aren't having to work so hard. And that too helps to build the flow. Hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. You may find that your breathing just coordinates gently with the movement, because as your body expands, it's quite natural to take a breath in. So this would be in breath and then out breath as you come back to the middle. But if you find that your body's actually breathing in a different way, don't try and force that to change. The breathing will come naturally and smoothly with the development of the posture and with the development of that spacious quality within your body. There is so much that we do, that our bodies do when they're given the chance to do it. But quite often, for one reason or another, we prevent them happening well. Tightness in the chest can affect your breathing. Tightness in your belly can affect your breathing. Take away that tightness and your body will breathe. One more time, hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. Good. Give your legs a shake. Maintain the width of your step. If I place this stick down on the ground here and straighten it up. It's not straight. There you go. So there, if I put my left foot against the stick, then what I'm going to do is I turn my right foot out, so it's the foot on your left. And when I step forward, I'm going to step along that line of the stick. We sometimes refer to these as tram lines. Again, this is against our normal step where we would normally do this, take a much narrower step and roll forwards with that momentum. You want to imagine, to say what we call the tram lines here. Again, one foot turns out, we step forwards to here. And when we come to the actual stepping, we do the same thing. And how we would take the step was we would bring the foot in, push back, and go, I'm going to step on the stick. But you can see where my foot would have gone down if the stick hasn't been in the way. Yeah. So try and think of that. Imagine the parallel lines, the tram lines, as you stand here, going through your feet and going straight up the space in front of you. Turn one foot out. You can play around with that angle until it's comfortable, but the front foot points straight ahead. And then transferring your weight. Pushing from the foot. Again, a very common habit, a very useful habit this time, but one that isn't much use for what we're doing at the moment, is to lean when we go to take a step. We angle forwards, and that takes our center of gravity forwards, and we can roll along quite nicely. But with the shorter step, and with our concern for very precise weight transfer, good posture while we're doing it, then this movement here comes from the ground. Again, if I show you with the long pole, what I want to do is this. So we get used to this idea that there's a center line in the body that we're maintaining a connection with. Going to about 60% of your weight in the front foot, maybe up to 70 in the back foot at the moment. Still feeling that sense when we did row in a boat, I talked about the hips dropping back. So the hips are still dropping back, and that helps you to avoid this kind of angling forwards. And even if you did, if it's the hips dropping back, I can do this. I can just drop the hips down and come back. So I sometimes describe this center line as being like a post that a boat is moored to in the sea. We don't want to get to a mentality where we're rigidly holding that any more than the boat is completely immobile against the post. The sea's moving the boat around, but it's connected to the post so it doesn't drift off too far. So there's all sorts of reasons why we might angle slightly. And there's one or two exercises, as you found out, where we do that angle, but this isn't one of them. Now, when you go into your back foot, if you raise your front toes, you'll find a little bit more weight drops back. And when you go into the front foot, if you let the back knee bend forwards, your heel will come up, a bit more weight goes into the front foot. So gradually getting more weight flowing down through your leg, allowing that to happen until we get to the point where there's hardly any weight left in what we would refer to as the empty leg in Tai Chi. And it's at that point that we just contract the leg. It's though you're drawing your foot in towards your hip and then pushing it away again. Drawing in again, try not to tilt or lean. It can feel quite difficult and it's quite strong in our legs. So it may be that you need to do it more often to condition your body. Same thing on the other side. Remember that thing, doing of your pelvis being level. The pelvis just sort of hangs from the spine. Try not to hold yourself tight around waist and belly. You'll end up restricting the movement of your pelvis, raising your toes and your heel. The pelvis needs to be able to move for your stability, especially if you're on rough ground, because the pelvis and that whole area work a bit like the suspension of a car. They absorb, to an extent, irregularities in the surface that you're moving on. Irregularities that can make life a bit bumpy, but which could also throw you over. Drawing your foot in, pushing out. This movement is effectively your leg swinging from your hip and then being pushed down. And then this time step through. This is how, again, the foot comes in, through and out. And then when you run out of room, change direction. Check out. Have your right foot forwards. Start with your weight in your back foot. Place your hands over your belly. Move forwards and feel as though your arms are being pushed forwards, elbows pushed out, just separating your fingers a little bit. Don't pull your hands behind your chest. Just pigeon spreads its wings. And then coming back, bringing your hands back. Through the expansion of your belly, solar plexus, your chest as you go forwards. And as you go back, the front of the body contracts. Feel how your back expands. Again, if you fancy working with your breathing, this can be quite a useful exercise. Just see how it feels every now and then. Don't do it all the time, but every now and then, see how it feels to take a breath in as you go forwards and then back. Don't feel that you need to stick rigidly to a breathing pattern. Just let your body breathe naturally. One more time. And then sink back, rest in the back foot, let your hands drop to your sides, move forwards and just feel your arms swinging after you. It's similar in a way to the swaying in the river exercise we did right at the start of the class. Because if you're in water, there'll be this natural resistance to your arms moving, so they tend to drag behind your shoulders. And then maybe just swing forwards a little bit. Nice and flowing. Feel the weight of your arms once again hanging from the shoulders. One more time. And with a similar kind of feel, but a little bit more focused, hands in front of you, turning palm forwards, pushing a wave or pushing a boat. And let your arms overextend. One more time. Bring the feet down. So those three movements on the opposite side. Start up with your weight back, hands on your belly, pigeon spreads its wings. And as though you're moving through water, feeling within your body, either like water flowing or, I just sometimes describe as though all the internal organs and tissues, joints are being given a very gentle massage. And then fisherman cast a net. And then pushing away. Let's do one more. And then shake out. Just rubbing your hands together. And then with the pads of your fingers, tapping gently over your face, over your head and neck. I use the palms of my hands here, down to one shoulder. The other side. Very light on the lower part of your back. Moving around your hips, legs. Nice and light on your belly. Finally, the upper part of the chest. So coming back to the parallel stance, so embrace tiger, return to mountain. Just a reminder that in a couple of weeks' time, on the 25th of June, is going to be the day retreat out at Reach. There are details of that in the mail out, but you can always email me if you haven't got them. Feel free to do that if you want to know any more. Give us a shout on that. But now, just coming back to this central position, sometimes referred to the quality of it, the name given it, Zhongding, central equilibrium. Just so that this becomes the final thing, the final impression we have from the class, because this is the mooring post, if you like. This is the anchor. Sinking down and pushing up your arms, reaching out a little bit, expanding, but then everything drawing in, starting with your arms coming around, elbows dropping, hips beginning to drop. Just settling in all those three elements. Remember, mind, body, energy, those three components of the art. Really don't see them as being separate, just different aspects of the same thing. Here, everything just quiet. One more time. Stand, take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. That was lovely. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. As always, if you have any questions or comments, do feel free to email me.